focus on the diet first. It's like building a house. I said, do the foundation. The diet is the foundation. It doesn't cost as much as the big thing. So focus on that, because that is what I think is the main thing it is. And I've seen it in many patients now to recovery, and especially at that fast rate.
Hello and welcome to Autism Parenting Secrets. It's Len, and with me today is Dr. Novlet Davis. She's a physician trained and certified in internal medicine and now has a functional medicine clinic in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's also mom to Christopher, who was diagnosed with moderate severe autism at age 3, and he is now 12 years old and thriving. Dr. Davis has an inspiring story to share, and she brings to this discussion a very powerful combination that only a mom who is also a functional medicine doctor can provide. The secret this week is, seriously, clean up the diet first. Welcome, Dr. Davis.
Thank you.
So yes, we met at the MAPS conference, Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs. We've had a few episodes. I'll put them in the show notes. And that was me being a parent, and a whole bunch of medical professionals, practitioners, not just medical doctors, but practitioners who are dedicated to serving this population of kids. And so, for you to be there, my guess is that, there's been a journey that's led you to being even at that conference. So I'll hand it off to you to share your personal story and how you're right now really helping to empower parents to be the best parent they can be for their child.
Yes. Thanks, Len. I love talking about autism. It's my passion. It did not start that way because, as Len said, I'm an internist and I hospitalist for 20 years. But in 2015, my son, 3 years old, was diagnosed with moderate to severe autism. Prior to that, I did not really know much about autism because I'm an internist. I take care of adults in the hospital, a hospitalist, 18 years or older. So how I come to find out that he had moderate to severe autism was I sent him to a preschool. And in the preschool, after he was there, he's twins. I have a boy-girl twins. They were 3 years old. Sent them to the preschool because I just wanted them to get to in a social setting prior to being able to go to school, kindergarten. So after he was there for about maybe not even a week, a few days, they called me and they call me every day. Oh, Christopher is crying. Oh, Christopher is, and I'm thinking, this is a daycare. Why are they calling me? They're supposed to be equipped to handle that kind of stuff. So after about a week, they called an official meeting for myself and my husband, and we thought, Christopher, he's so smart because he could do a lot of stuff on the iPad. They were going to tell us how maybe he's a genius or something. So when we got there, I thought it was just going to be his teacher. It was a room full of the owner, everyone. And we were just like taken aback. At least I was. And we sat in the room and they said to me, we are not equipped to take care of Christopher here. They said he's a danger to himself. He's climbing up on the stuff. She said, I said, so what are you trying to tell me? They said, he's different. He's different. They did not use the word autism. They said, we cannot take him. His sister can stay, his twin sister, but we cannot take him here. So I was shocked. I was upset. I called all my other physician friends. I was telling them what happened to me. And then I tried to get him into another school that they recommended. And when I went there for an evaluation by a psychologist, and they evaluated him, and after 3 minutes he was done. And next day I went for the results, and I took Christopher with me. And this is the first someone was ever honest with me. I went into his office and he looked at me and he looked at Christopher running around, no spatial orientation, knocking everything down. And he said to me, are you a physician, right? I said, yes. And he said, look at your son. So I'm like, and he said, your son has severe autism. How could you not know that? And that's what he said to me. And right then and there, it's like I was, I had to sit down because I was just like, I don't know, I had to sit down. I was so weak. So he said, look at him. He's bumping his head in all the furniture. He cannot talk. I think I had like a block, and everything he did, I had a reason for it. And that's why when other parents, I see them going through the same thing, I could totally relate, because when I look back, he had every sign. I mean, he couldn't talk. He didn't know who I was. He would, if I come home from work, he would still be playing. The others would run to me. I look at videos. He was out of it totally. And I was just in denial, and I blocked it all out. I compensated for everything. No one could say anything about him to me. And right at that moment is when I had to face everything that was somewhere in me. I had to face it. And he sat me down and he said, your son has severe nonverbal autism. We cannot take him at this school either. I said, so what do I do? He said, you have to get him in intense ABA. And even then, we don't know if, how we'll be able to function. So he gave me some numbers, and so that was my introduction to autism right then.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. And I mean, I'm flashing back to, my own experience, right, with my wife, Cass. And when we got the diagnosis, I guess I couldn't get beyond the fact that it was like a 3-minute, evaluation, that then the next day you get this unbelievably shocking statement about your son. So I have issues with how somebody could do that quickly. But I guess I could appreciate, like you, like the honesty of somebody just sharing something that, again, hopefully they're sharing it with the intent to be useful, but still super hard to hear. And I think the suggestion that you got, and I think so many parents who are listening can probably relate, right? You get this message and then you get very little hope, right? So in your case, just like in our case, they said, you got to go ABA, you got to hit it hard. And then you kind of keep your fingers crossed. Even then it may not work, which I feel like that, I wish things had changed in the, over 12 years, since that was the case for us, or longer than that now. But I think a lot of parents are still getting that message early on, which really sets them off, potentially in a real wrong direction and in a bad place in terms of mindset about what's possible.
Right.
So you heard that. What were your next steps?
Len, I tell you, that was, if someone could point to the worst day of their life, because this is my only son, it was the worst day of my life. I think once he gave me the paper and I left that office, I don't even know how I got home. Because I got home and the only thing I had strength to do was get in bed. I couldn't do anything else. I get in bed, and because I was so weak, it was just devastating. So I stayed the rest of the day. My husband came home. We talked about it. And to the next day, I said, I have to be there for him. It doesn't matter how I feel. So I got up, all the numbers he gave me. I didn't even call. I just went to the places and I knocked on the door. They let me in, and I started to tell my story. You got to let him in. You got to let him in. I need to start ABA. I need to start speech. I need to start OT. I need to start all those things he told me. So once I went through the grieving phase pretty quick, I jumped on and I started getting him. I got him into everything. And I also scheduled another psychologist because I wanted to make sure, because I figured that one just took 4 or 5 minutes. How could he tell all that in that short time? So I said, I wanted a second opinion. So I scheduled him for another psychologist, and we went there. She took 2 hours. She was a 2-day. But then she said the same thing. She said he has, moderate to severe. She said moderate to severe, because I was like, oh, could you say mild? And she said, well, I can't say mild. I just was looking for something to say that he wasn't as bad as they said. And she told me at that point that I should put my name on a waiting list for a group home, because she said it takes a long time to get in. And so it's best to just start early. And my husband was like, so what can we do? How should we help him? And the same thing, ABA, speech, OT. So like every other mother, I said, well, let me just Google because I don't know what else to do. And, it sounds to me like it was a death sentence. Like it doesn't matter what I do, he was gonna. So I started Googling and trying to see how I could help him. And I started trying to find, are there any success stories? Has anybody recovered? And that's when I saw some stuff about Dan doctors then. So that's how I got started.
Got it. Yeah, well, it's strikingly similar to our journey as well, where those conferences, the Defeat Autism Now, which is no longer in existence, and it's kind of reconstituted itself. And in many ways, it's now being continued by what MAPS is all about. But yeah, those conferences definitely were incredibly important for me to be able to help educate me on what is possible and these different ways of looking at how you might be able to help your child biomedically. So I found them extremely useful. So interesting that that's how you, where you seem very much like my wife, Cass, where immediately, she was going to search and see what she can find and then find these different avenues where, that may seem obvious, but I think, it's hard for a lot of parents where they may get this diagnosis and then you kind of, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just kind of take a back seat and wait to be told what the next steps are, as opposed to being a bit more proactive, which is what Cass and you both did. And going back to what you were talking about before, though, I want to just touch on it is so easy to miss it as a parent because you only are looking at your child through the lens of love and acceptance, and it's really hard to see. Even now, when I look at photos of my son, in the first year, he doesn't look healthy. And at the time I thought he was the picture of health.
Right.
So even behavior wise and the like, it's easy to kind of to knock yourself, but it's easy to miss when you're the parent. And I guess refreshing when you have someone who can give you an objective assessment of what they see. Although what you experienced sounded very direct and very abrupt. For me, it would have felt like getting hit in the head with a shovel.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me at the time. I think I needed to hear the truth though, because when I looked back, when he was about 18 months, my husband had said to me that his dad thought Christopher had autism because he was just there spinning the wheels on the truck and lining up toys. And I was so upset that they could have said such a thing that I went to the pediatrician and I was telling the pediatrician, what my husband and his dad said. And he said, oh no, he's fine. So then I felt good. I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. So it was good that someone actually just came on and say, this is it. And then I was able to get through that denial phase and just start seeing what can I do to help him now. So yeah.
Yeah, no, the grieving piece of it is one that, is easy to miss in terms of the fact that things are different and your child, even though your child is who your child is, you're in your mind, what you're hoping for, what you're wanting for your child, all of that does, it's a traumatic event to hear a diagnosis, especially when delivered with very little hope. So I appreciate where you were and the fact that you said, okay, there's got to be more I can do. You found about conferences, you found these different approaches. What would you even now at this point in your story suggest to somebody who's just received a diagnosis in that early phase, other than allowing yourself to grieve and to go through that process to some degree, to be able to get into a place where you can then make good decisions, right? Because if you miss that grief step, it's easy to kind of just stay in a place that, without trying to judge it, it just isn't the strongest place for you to figure out what's going to help your child the most.
I would say, because if I know now, if I know then what I know now, because back then I did not know it was possible to recover. Even though I see all the stories, I didn't know it was possible to recover. So I would tell a mom that was going through this phase, and I spent a ton of money on therapists. I spent a ton of money on ABA. I mean, I can't even imagine how much occupational therapy. So if I was to do it again, I would tell someone really just really focus on healing the body, focus on the diet, just focus. That's where I have had the most success. And even seeing patients today, I've seen people that go to, I like hyperbarics, I like stem cell, I like everything else. But if I had it to do over, out of just, it's only after I was going through everything for 6 months to a year, I started with, with diet early, but I really didn't believe as much because everyone, it was so conflicting. Some people were saying gluten free, dairy free is good. Some people were saying it didn't make a difference. Everything was all over the place. I was looking at studies and some were positive and some were negative. So I can tell you of 99 to 100% myself, because my son went from that severe autism to being totally recovered by 5 and end up from a autism school to a regular school, no assistance, getting A's and B's. So I know 99%. And what I did, I worked on the diet. I was on that diet, so I would tell a mom, I know that's what you should do. You should focus. Don't forget all the big things. You do it, but focus on the diet first. It's like building a house. I said, do the foundation. The diet is the foundation. It doesn't cost as much as the big thing. So focus on that, because that is what I think is the main thing it is. And I've seen it in many patients now to recovery, and especially at that fast rate.
All right. Well, that's a powerful perspective. And when you talk about the diet, right, I think a lot of times where it gets confusing is that, first of all, you're not talking about a diet for autism. You're just talking about using diet for overall health and wellness, right? So it's really this is not about autism per se, as much as what's going to be the best thing to help your child's body be everything it's designed to be. So you're saying diet is super important, 99% perhaps of the results, if you will, you will attribute to diet. And you don't have your own unique, here's the diet that you should do, right? Because that's where it becomes so individualized.
Yes, I'm from Jamaica. You probably hear my accent, right? So I grew up in Jamaica, and when he was diagnosed, and I started thinking back in my mind, because I'm from the country in Jamaica. My dad had farms and everything. So we were getting the cow and getting the milk from the cow and everything was natural. We never knew of fast food. We didn't know, anything like that. And my mom had 8 of us, and none of us had any issues. And my mom is 94. She doesn't even have a high blood pressure. I mean, she's as healthy as ever. No. So I just started thinking back to those days. And then I started thinking back when I look at the research in the 1970s, it was 1 in 10,000, right? So I think, what were they doing there? I want to go back to living just like back in those days. So that's what I did with the diet. I said, we cleaned out our pantry. I'm cooking everything from scratch. And I know it can be done because I'm a hospitalist. I was working 12-hour shifts, 7 days on, 7 days off. So I was really busy, but I would dedicate a whole day in my kitchen. I said, I'm cooking everything from scratch. There's nothing processed that's going to go in his mouth. So I bought everything organic, and I cooked everything. So and I want single things. So if I'm getting meat, I'm getting beans, I'm getting, just nothing that I can, with more than 8 ingredients, as they say. So that's what I did. Organic, clean food, clean diet. And, he was a picky eater. That's what they say. He would only eat like 3 or 4 things. So that's what we started with. When we started, he wouldn't eat anything. My husband would sit at the table 1 hour, just slowly feeding, eat a bite here and there. And it's not going to change. It was a hard process from someone who did not eat, only crunchy, so it was very hard that first month, but we did it. So that's what I did. It wasn't like a GAPS diet or a SCD diet. It was just a very healthy, no processed food diet we started off with.
Okay. Yeah. No, there's nothing more foundational than that, right? Which is basically, another way of phrasing that is you didn't feed Christopher crap, right? Like you fed him real food and you made it yourself to make sure that anything that could be toxic, that could mess things up for him, you made sure you took control over that. So I love hearing that. And I applaud what you did because, I know we had a similar response, and Cass totally led the way with taking control in the kitchen. But our son, Rye, he had, in addition to the autism diagnosis, life-threatening allergies to most foods, particularly peanuts and soy was truly life-threatening, and a whole bunch of sensitivities to pretty much everything. So our hand was kind of forced where we had to be in the kitchen, or Cass was in the kitchen cooking things from scratch, non-processed. It was more of necessity. In your case, it wasn't, but you did it anyway because you believed, I'm guessing, and I'm putting words in your mouth. Tell me if these are correct, but you knew, you had a sense, an inner knowing that food really mattered and it was worth the effort.
Yes, yes. And I was onto that because he had severe constipation. He would only go to the bathroom once every 7 days or so, and I have to sometimes make him. His belly, I took pictures, looked like he was pregnant, sometimes. And I noticed the behavior got worse during those things. And when he did have a bowel movement, the bowel movement was so large, it would block the toilet. So I had this stick with a thing on it that I had to break it up before so I know it has to be the gut because the bowel movement was pale in color. It was just, there was something with that bowel movement. So I said, it has to start from the gut. So I started researching about gut microbiome, and I started saying how to heal the gut, and diet food is medicine. I started with that. So that's how I really started honing in on the gut.
Good. Well, let's focus on that for a second, because while I'm nodding and everything you're saying makes perfect sense to me, and I feel like it's obvious, it may not be obvious. I've run into so many parents who aren't aware that, in terms of what proper GI health looks like, that, you're looking at least one formed bowel movement a day, which is what's appropriate for your child and for adults too, and for us to detoxify and to have good health, gut health, brain health. So the idea of a child being constipated for a week and only going once a week, that's not a minor thing. That's a major sign. Now we had the opposite problem where our son had 12 unformed bowel movements a day, which was also a great sign to us that something wasn't right. And again, none of this has anything to do with autism. It's just that proper or good GI health is really important for us to do basically bodily functions, right? To eat food, to absorb nutrients, to get rid of what needs to get gotten rid of. And so I know there's a lot of adults walking around who don't have a formed bowel movement a day. And not to say that that's not okay, but again, in terms of your body, it's designed to do that. At least, that's the process that you're going for. And I know a lot of people aren't really aware of that. So they may have a constipated child and not think it's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a very big deal for us because once we started, so first I, researched, and I go to PubMed a lot because that's where I'm, internist. I have a degree in biology and master's in physiology. So I love to look at research. So there's so many research though on PubMed. I mean, over 80,000 articles even just last year, just on autism. So there's a ton of information. So I started looking, how can I get the bowel movements better, changing the diet, doing more vegetables, more fiber, doing stuff like magnesium. So I noticed though, once I started getting the diet better, once I started the bowel movements every day, is behavior, all that, he used to bang his head on the stairs. The banging of the head stopped. He was up, half the night, all that kind of stuff stopped. So I got, I read every book too. I was up 3 o'clock most. I know Cass probably the same thing. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep much myself. I was up like 3 o'clock every morning. My husband's a chiropractor. So we were all, up all the time researching. I mean, how can we help him? And so we researched, we read Natasha McBride, the GAPS book. And she said in Europe, all the parents had an enema bag in their house, that they would, so I got an enema bag too. So I said, if he didn't, because the bowel movement was so important to me, I said, well, because I noticed the bowel movement was linked to behavior, because I feel like, or now I know that if the bowel movement stays there, it festers, you reabsorb toxins, and all the toxins affect neurotransmitters, affect brain function. So now I know, but back then I just know that by looking at him as a parent, that if he doesn't have a bowel movement, his attitude, the angry, the hitting of the head, and all those things were worse. So we got the enema back, and if he did not have a bowel movement, then I'd get that enema kicked out, and he was going to have a bowel movement one way or the other.
So you made sure it happened. So let's hover over this for a second, because I think you had a lot of really good concepts I'd like to just focus on. So if a parent's listening and they're like, okay, how does diet matter, like in terms of the behaviors? So your son, right, was basically getting kicked out of a school because they said those behaviors, whatever he was doing, I'm guessing aggressive or unruly or whatever the case may be. So if you're looking at it now and you're saying, okay, well, diet, you taking control of the diet resulted in those behaviors lessening or going away. What specifically do you think it was? So in other words, the diet could make a big difference, perhaps, if there were nutrients that he needed and wasn't getting in his existing diet. So therefore upgrading food may have given him nutrients that helped with the proper functioning and the like. And so I'm guessing that was a part of it. But otherwise, I think what you focused on is the fact that the GI issues he was having and the fact that he wasn't, that basically he was kind of retaining and not excreting the waste, that the toxins were basically wreaking havoc. Like they should have been exited each day, but instead they were accumulating.
Yes.
And that was the reason why changing the diet, cooking yourself, not having the chemicals, additives, and all those things that come with processed food. And I'm also guessing perhaps eliminating some foods that maybe he was allergic or sensitive to.
Yes.
Right. So it was more of a toxicity issue for Christopher. Is that correct?
Yes. So it was both. It was all that you mentioned. So when the gut was so distended, he was reabsorbing toxins. I realized that. Plus, you just could not be comfortable, because if someone has bowel movements, just sitting in there, your belly just getting more distended. And I think he probably wanted to go. Then it hurts probably, but he wasn't able to tell me that it hurts. So I think because of that, with the pain, he didn't know how to express it. Then he would act out with it. And then the nutrients, I think that with him not being absorbed, just like you said, with all the inflammation in the gut, not being able to absorb all those proper nutrients, can't make a lot of the enzymes and all that stuff. So like magnesium, all those zinc, all those things taste, but so everything was off. So I find that once I started giving him very nutrient dense food, and I did start, multivitamins too, I started doing all those things, then he wasn't banging his head anymore. I noticed he would line up toys, but he wasn't crying as much, because he would have these meltdowns that could go on for a long time, for 45 minutes. He would just go on and on and on and on. So all those kind of got a little bit less. He would kind of have his hand up his fingers up his face and kind of always kind of stemming and spinning around in circles, turning light switch on and off, walking on his tiptoe, so all those things I noticed with the change in diet and just doing just a change in diet. I went to organic because that's all I could find, and just real food, which I spent all day Saturday in the kitchen preparing. I prepared what I did because I was so busy. I'd prepare for like 3-4 days at a time. So on Saturdays, I would go buy all my groceries. I'd buy my meat. Like I'd go to Whole Foods, get organic. And because seasoning my meat, I was determined that he is not getting anything processed. So I would get all my season, my onions, scallion. I would blend them up in a blender, put a little salt. I would make a mason jar of that. I'd season all my meats and freeze them and then cook some. So but my whole day on Saturday was in the kitchen, just preparing and prepping and labeling and all that stuff. So everything. So he had a lot of nutrient dense food when I was done with everything. Yes. So I think I really think that, and one thing I want to say to parents is, because when I was doing that, Len, for the first month, because people say, oh, I've tried gluten-free for one. I did gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, dye-free. So they said, oh, I tried it for 1 month and I didn't see anything, but I could have given up, because I was going for at least 6, 7, 8 months. I saw some behavior improvements, but as far as speech as far as awareness, I would still have to hold on to him or put something around him when we are going anywhere because he'd run away. I still had to watch him in the backyard because he'd pick up the bird poop and try to eat it. I still, you take the dog food and try to eat it. So I see him with the dog food in his mouth. So I still saw all of that. And there are days where I said, oh, is he going to get any better? I mean, I'm doing all this and he's still just as autistic as they come. So I realize, and I'll tell this to parents, I realize that when people say I've tried it one day and, it didn't work. You can't. For me, I was solidly a year not knowing if he was going to get better, not knowing if he was going to talk. I didn't know any of this. I was just going that, I was just going. But when he started improving after doing all, and I didn't do anything miraculous. I really just did the diet supplements. I did some testing, and not everyone is going to be like that but my whole thing was making sure he had really good food. And then after a year, all of a sudden, he just started, it's like exponential after that. It's like, I don't know, it's just like exponential after that. If you see 1 year video and another year video, he started talking, he started looking at me, he was more aware, he was playing with his siblings, he had a lot of fear. He could not go on a roller coaster, could not ride a bicycle. He was so fearful, all that kind of went away. So for us, it was a solid year of just toiling before we started seeing changes.
Well, in what you just shared, there's two really powerful power moves, I think, that you put into place. Let's go back a little bit. One was the batch cooking, right? So you didn't have time to do that, to kind of cook and prepare and do all that every day, given your schedule. So you just devoted a day, right? Which you could have been doing other things, but you devoted a day because it was a priority, and to batch cook and to like portion it out, and we use like a food saver to freeze meals and all that. That's a fantastic way of making this more manageable. So yeah, that's a great best practice. If Cass I wish she was on this call because there's so much that you two have in common, and you could share even more tips. But yeah, doing it all in one day and having it for the week, that's a very, very powerful thing to do. And then the other thing, which, is definitely worth us focusing on, is you committed to the idea that food really mattered. And you also let go of the idea that, okay, and I got to see results quick, because it is a long term, like diet changes and upgrading the dietary interventions, whatever word you want to give it. It's a long-term play. Now you could see some short-term improvements if you are feeding less toxic food to a child, right? You could expect that, but otherwise, no. It is a long-term play. So the fact that you went in it, committing to it, and not saying I'm going to do it for a month, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back, because that's the other thing. If you look at it, is this isn't a intervention. Let's see if this helps. It's really the food avenue is more of a total lifestyle shift.
It is.
Right? Where you're like, this is how we're going to operate. And I trust that this will help everyone in the family, including my child on the spectrum. And I have no idea when positive things will occur that I might be able to pinpoint. But even if I don't, it's still worth doing, because this is just the right thing to do for overall health.
Yes. And I have to say, when we committed to doing this, because I have 3 children, and when we committed to doing this, myself and my husband, we committed together, and we decided as a family, we're going to do this. So we cleaned out our house. No one in my house or in our house was eating any gluten. No one in our house was eating any chips or anything. We didn't go to fast food. So we committed as a family to doing this. And I tell my other siblings, this is what we're going to do. I said, our son is drowning, and you guys have, I think a dietitian told me this, with her child before he even had the diagnosis of autism. I said, he's drowning. You guys have life jacket on. We all have to save him. We have to do this as a family together. I can't do it by myself. So everybody was eating the same thing. So we all went gluten free. And then, just as an aside, the twin sister was born with congenital hypothyroidism. So she was on thyroid medicine from she was born. And when she was about 2.5, the endocrinologist tried to wean and the TSH went up. So he said she was going to be on it for life. When I started the diet for everybody, after taking her back to her endocrinologist, maybe like 6 months later, he took her off the medicine. And then he monitored her blood for every 6 weeks, and then 6 months, and then he discharged her. And she's 12 years old too now. She did not have congenital hyper. She was just toxic. I think she was really just toxic because once we detoxed everybody with all the diet and, we were juicing and we're making kefir, sauerkraut, she was fine. So you can tell I'm sold on that diet. I'm really sold on that lifestyle change because I've seen it take away sickness from my household.
No, that's just absolutely amazing. And then now you stumbled on a third power move that you did, which is you did it together. And and so if certain food wasn't worth feeding Christopher, right? If it was quote unquote toxic in your mind from his standpoint, why not for everyone, right? Everyone can benefit, even though I'm sure you and your husband didn't have to give up gluten and you could have continued eating it. What a power move for everyone to do it. And we did the same thing. And I always had to scratch my head at other parents that I would see at conferences who would talk about doing a special diet for their child, like a real restrictive diet, but their child's the only one at the table with that diet and everyone else is eating all the other stuff. And I'm like, wow, that for that child, that's just got to be so hard. No wonder meltdowns and picky. Hey, the child's looking around saying, I'll have what you're having. And so again, it may seem like a sacrifice, but it really is a gift you give yourself to eat a cleaner diet, to model for your child eating healthy, nourishing foods. And I think your story, there's so much that I can resonate with. I think so much that's going to really resonate with our listeners. And your child, I think the key message here is that gut health is really important.
Very important.
Food is perhaps the biggest move you can make. But if gut health's important, there's a lot of shortcuts that are out there too. Let's say if somebody has a child like Christopher was with severe constipation, you could take a shortcut and say, okay, constipation. Okay, let's take Miralax every day and move things along. But with Miralax, there's like so many issues. We did an entire episode on it about the dangers of PEG, which is the only ingredient in Miralax. And that's where, it's a little bit complex in terms of looking at your child's gut health and having a medical practitioner like yourself to guide you with what's going on, what's happening that might be resulting in constipation or diarrhea or whatever the case may be. And then giving you a plan that's unique for your child. But yes, while there's a lot of things that can help your child, a lot of interventions, getting food right, cleaning it up and making sure it's as nourishing and non-toxic as possible is a move that can benefit any child.
Yes. And it's so tricky. I think I say sometimes that it seemed to me to be healthy these days. It almost take a whole degree in just food science because some parent, I was even reading an article yesterday and it was talking about, I think it was in New York. I'm not sure where it was, but it was talking about, the artificial sweeteners, that a lot of the artificial sweeteners, aspartame and all those that they found, I think I forget the name, it's neotame, I think, that it's one of the compound or something coming from aspartame that's in yogurt. They put it in yogurt and all these other things, and that the research found that it was toxic to the lining of the gut and toxic to the gut microbiome, and how detrimental it was for your health. So some say, oh, I'm feeding my child yogurt, I'm trying to get them healthy, but you're taking 10 steps forward and 15 steps backward because you don't know that you're trying to get the gut microbiome healthy because you're doing that. And instead you're destroying it because, with little things like that. And then I said, Mel, good thing I did everything from scratch because I didn't take any chances, because sometimes you think something doesn't have anything bad in it because it's touted as being good. But then again, process, you look and you're not making gains. So just little things like that. can really throw you off. And you're saying, well, the diet isn't working. Well, that's why it's not working, because you're doing everything, but you're giving that and you're destroying everything that you're just built. So there's so many factors involved.
Yep, which is why getting good guidance from the right practitioners, again, people with the right perspective. There's a bunch out there, and generally, though, you don't necessarily want to just go to a nutritionist who may, be kind of just giving generic guidance. It's someone who's got a perspective that really is useful. Is the key, finding that right person or practice like yours. So tell people a little bit about how they can find out more about you.
I am in Cary, but I also do virtual or in person if you're in the state of North Carolina. I do have people fly from other states and come to North Carolina. My website is raleighholistichealthcare.com. So you could find me on that website.
All right, perfect. Well, I really thank you for this conversation. I think, again, this is just a topic we can't talk enough about. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and about what's really possible for a parent if they really take this seriously and focus on food. And again, what that means for you, it's going to be unique, but there's so much opportunity to improve things with something as simple as just really being more mindful and upgrading the diet. So thank you for sharing with everyone how they could do that.
Thank you.